The sun had barely crested the horizon when I heard the sharp slap of flip-flops against pavement outside my window. I didn't need to look to know who it was. Marlene, the self-proclaimed queen of Willow Creek Estates, was on her morning patrol. Her presence was as predictable as the trash collection schedule, and just as unpleasant. I peeked through the blinds, catching sight of her severe bob haircut swaying as she marched down the sidewalk, clipboard in one hand, phone in the other, her eyes scanning the neighborhood like a hawk hunting prey. Today, it seemed, her sights were set on May again. It all started a few months ago with a letter. I'd come home from a long shift at the warehouse, my boots still caked with dust, when I found a crisp, white envelope taped to my front door. The HOA seal glared at me like a judgmental eye. Inside, in bold, aggressive font, it read, "All trash bins must be removed from the curb no later than 9 a.m. the morning following collection day. Failure to comply will result in a fine." I'd laughed at first, thinking it was some kind of neighborhood prank. My trash cans, too, standard-issue gray bins, had been out until maybe 10 a.m. that day because I'd overslept after a double shift. Was someone really watching my curb that closely? Apparently, yes. And her name was Marlene. I didn't think much of it at the time. I shrugged, made a mental note to drag the bins in earlier next time, and tossed the letter in a drawer. But then the second notice came, this time with a due law 25 fine attached. Then a third, upping it to due law 50. Each one accused me of neglecting neighborhood aesthetics, as if my bins were staging a full-scale rebellion against property values. It was absurd. My cans weren't overflowing, weren't tipped over, weren't even scratched up. They sat neatly by the curb, minding their own business. Yet somehow, they become Marlene's personal vendetta. Marlene wasn't just any HOA busybody, she was a force of nature. A middle-aged woman with a scowl that could curdle milk and a bob so sharp it looked like it could cut glass. She'd appointed herself the enforcer of Willow Creek's rules. She didn't just enforce them, she lived for them. Every morning, she'd stalk the streets, documenting violations with the zeal of a private investigator. A lawn half an inch too long? A car parked an inch over the line? She'd write it up. And my trash cans? They become her white whale. At first, I thought it was just the HOA being overly strict. But it didn't take long to realize Marlene was the common thread. I'd catch her watching me from her porch across the street, her bony fingers clutching her phone, her eyes narrowed, like she was waiting for me to slip up. One morning, I tested it. I waited until exactly 9:01 a.m., then strolled out to grab my bins, pretending not to notice her. Sure enough, she burst out of her house like a tornado, flip-flops smacking the ground, her voice shrill as she yelled, "You're in violation, Ethan. Rules are rules." I glanced at my watch, then at her. "It's 1 minute past 9, Marlene. You serious?" Her lips pursed into a thin line. "If we let one person slide, the whole neighborhood falls apart. I'm calling the board." She waved her phone like a weapon. I couldn't help I laughed. "Oh, I'm sure my trash cans are tanking property values as we speak." She didn't like that. Her face flushed red, and she stormed off, muttering about fines and standards. The next day, a due law 100 fine notice was taped to my door. Failure to adhere to waste management policy. That's when I knew this wasn't just about rules. This was personal. Marlene had singled me out, and if I didn't push back, she'd keep coming. I wasn't about to let her win. If Marlene wanted a fight, I'd give her one, but I'd do it smart. I pulled the HOA rule book from their website and read it cover to cover, every dry, nitpicky page. That's when I found my first weapon. The rule about trash bins said they had to be removed by 9 a.m. When possible. Those two little words were gold. When possible meant wiggle room, and I was about to wiggle my way right out of her grasp. The next trash day, I decided to have some fun. I'd tweaked my ankle playing pickup basketball over the weekend, not badly, but enough to sell a story. I wrapped it in an old brace I had lying around, grabbed a crutch from a Halloween costume years back, and waited. At 9:05 a.m., right on cue, Marlene was out there, phone in hand, glaring at my bins like they'd insulted her personally. I hobbled out onto my porch, making sure to limp dramatically as I dragged the bins up the driveway. She pounced. "Late again, Ethan. I've already reported you. I sighed, loud and theatrical. Yeah, I know, Marlene. Sprained my ankle over the weekend. Doc said to take it easy, but I didn't want to break your precious rules. I winced for effect, leaning on the crutch. Her smirk faltered. She shifted her weight, clearly torn. If she pushed this, she'd look like a monster finding an injured guy. Well, she said, rules are rules. I pulled out my ACA printed copy of the HOA bylaws, the when possible clause highlighted in bright yellow. Sure, but it says when possible. And this. I gestured to my ankle. Makes it impossible. Unless you wanted to hurt myself worse just for a trash can. Her eye twitched. She muttered something about checking with the board and stomped off. Round 1, Ethan. But I knew Marlene wasn't done. She'd been terrorizing this neighborhood for years, and a little loophole wasn't going to stop her. Sure enough, the next week, another notice arrived. This one claimed a pattern of noncompliance and threatened steeper fines. She wasn't just trying to nickel and dime me anymore, she was building a case to bury me. That's when I upped the ante. I installed a cheap motion-activated security camera by my front door, angled to catch the curb. Every trash day, I'd record myself MOVYing the bins, timestamp and all. If Marlene wanted to lie, I'd have proof she was full of it. I also started digging. I talked to my neighbors quietly, over beers in backyards or quick chats by mailboxes. Turns out, I wasn't the only one she targeted. Old man Jenkins got fined for Leah VYing his garage door open too long. Sarah down the street got hit for a non-approved flower pot color. Marlene had been running this petty dictatorship for years, and people were fed up but too scared to fight back. I wasn't scared. I was pissed. The next collection day, I was ready. At 8:59 a.m., Marlene was out there, hovering like a vulture. I waited until the clock hit 9 o'clock exactly, then strolled out, rolled my bins in, and stared her down the whole time. The camera caught every second. She sputtered, checking her watch, but she had nothing. I thought I'd won. Then the next day, another notice. Trash bins left unattended past required time. Fine, la 200. She doubled it. I checked the footage 9:00 a.m. On the dot. Marlene had lied, straight up fabricated the report. That was her mistake. She'd handed me everything I needed to end her reign of terror. I didn't waste time. I compiled my EVY Denke. Every notice she'd sent, my camera footage, photos of my bins, the highlighted rule book. I wrote a formal complaint to the HOA board, attaching it all, and didn't stop there. I copied the state housing authority and my cousin, who's a lawyer, just to twist a knife. I accused Marlene of falsifying reports, selective enforcement, and abusing her authority. If she thought I'd roll over, she was dead wrong. The response came fast. 2 days later, the HOA president, a quiet guy named Tom, who'd always seemed overwhelmed by Marlene, emailed me about an emergency meeting. My complaint had lit a fire. Neighbors started coming forward with their own stories. Fines for nonsense, threats over minor infractions, even Marlene snooping in yards with her phone. She'd been a one-woman plague, and the board had ignored it until now. The meeting was a circus. Marlene strutted in, all smug confidence, claiming she was upholding standards. Then Tom played my footage, rolling the bins in at 9 a.m., clear as day, while her report said I'd left them out. The room went quiet. Marlene stammered, tried to blame a misunderstanding, but it was over. The board voted on the spot. She was stripped of all HOA authority, banned from filing complaints, and every fine she'd issued in the last 6 months was voided. She sat there, red-faced and silent, as her little empire crumbled. But didn't end there. The state housing authority took my complaints seriously. Falsifying reports and issuing bogus fines? That's not just petty, that's illegal. They launched an investigation, and word spread fast. By the end of the month, a for sale sign went up in Marlene's yard. She was gone before summer, chased out by her own overreach. The neighborhood threw a quiet block party to Celebratino. One said it out loud, but we all knew what it was for. Me? I kept my camera up, just in case. The next trash day, I took my time rolling the bins in, savoring the peace. Marlene might have been watching from wherever she'd landed, but she had no power here anymore. Sometimes, the people who seem untouchable are just bullies hiding behind rules. All it takes is one person to call their bluff. I'd done it and I'd do it again if I had to. If you were the one in this story, how would you react? Would you stand up and fight back, or accept the unreasonable pressure and control from the HOA? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video with more people. Your small action gives us the motivation to keep bringing you more intense and engaging stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.